The gunshot that split the morning air sent Natalie Kane diving behind the water trough, her heart hammering against her ribs as splintered wood showered down around her like deadly rain. At 34 years old, she had survived worse than a drunken ranch hand with poor aim and a grudge over watered-down whiskey. But that did not make the situation any less terrifying as she crouched in the Colorado dust outside her saloon in Manassas, praying the fool would run out of bullets before her luck ran out entirely. The year was 1879, and Natalie had been running the Silver Star Saloon for 6 years since her husband died in a mining accident. She had learned to handle rowdy customers, card cheats, and men who thought a woman alone was easy prey. This morning's trouble had started over something so trivial she could barely remember what sparked it. But now she was pinned down behind a horse trough while bullets punched holes in the front of her establishment. The shooting stopped abruptly, followed by a heavy thud and the clatter of a gun hitting the ground. Natalie risked a glance over the rim of the trough and saw a young man standing over the unconscious form of her attacker, a pistol butt gleaming in his hand. He could not have been more than 22 or 23, tall and lean with sun-bronzed skin and hair the color of wheat at harvest time. He wore dusty trail clothes and a well-worn hat pushed back on his head, revealing eyes the blue of a mountain lake. "Are you hurt, madam?" he called out, already moving toward her with long, confident strides. Natalie stood slowly, her legs shaking despite her best efforts to appear composed. She brushed dust from her dark green dress, aware that her carefully pinned auburn hair had come partially loose during her desperate dive for cover. "I am fine, thanks to you, though my establishment has seen better mornings." The young man glanced at the bullet holes peppering the saloon's wooden facade and gave her a crooked smile that made something flutter unexpectedly in her chest. "I reckon paint is cheaper than a funeral. Thomas Fletcher, madam. Most folks call me Tom. Natalie Kane. I own the Silver Star." She extended her hand, intending a businesslike shake, but he took it with surprising gentleness, holding it just a moment longer than strictly necessary. His hands were calloused from hard work but warm and steady. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Kane, though I wish it were under better circumstances." He released her hand and turned his attention to the groaning man on the ground. "What do you want done with this one?" "There is a sheriff's office 2 streets over. If you could help me get him there, I would be grateful." Natalie tried to ignore the way Tom Fletcher's presence seemed to fill the space around her, solid and reassuring in a way she had not felt since losing her husband. Together, they hauled the still dazed ranch hand to the small building that served as both sheriff's office and occasional jail. Sheriff Morrison was a weathered man in his 50s who had known Natalie since she first arrived in Manassas as a bride of 18. He listened to their account with weary resignation. "That is the 3rd time this month someone has taken shots at something in this town," Morrison said, shaking his grizzled head. "I will keep him locked up until he sobers up and can pay for the damages." He looked at Tom with interest. "I have not seen you around here before, son." "Just passing through on my way to find ranch work," Tom replied. "Heard there might be opportunities in the San Luis Valley." "There are always ranches looking for good hands," Morrison confirmed. "If you are looking for a place to stay while you get your bearings, Mrs. Kane runs a respectable establishment. Clean rooms, decent food, no trouble." Tom's gaze shifted to Natalie, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks under the intensity of his attention. "I would be much obliged if you have a room available, madam." "I can pay, and I would be happy to help repair those bullet holes as partial compensation for your trouble this morning." Natalie knew she should refuse. There was something about this young cowboy that unsettled her in ways she could not quite name. But the Silver Star did have empty rooms and she could use help with repairs. I have space available. The rate is $4 a week, meals included. Fair enough. Tom touched the brim of his hat. I will get my horse settled at the livery and bring my gear over directly. After he left, Sheriff Morrison gave Natalie a knowing look. Seems like a decent young man. Young being the operative word, Natalie said more sharply than she intended. He cannot be more than 22. 23, according to what he told me, Morrison said mildly. Old enough to make his own choices. And you are not exactly ancient, Natalie. You have got plenty of good years ahead of you. Natalie did not dignify that with a response. She returned to the Silver Star, where her cook and part-time bartender, an older Mexican woman named Rosa, was already sweeping up broken glass from the morning's excitement. "That young man who helped you," Rosa said without looking up. "He is very handsome, no?" "I did not notice," Natalie lied, taking a broom to help with the cleanup. Rosa made a sound that was half laugh, half snort. "Your eyes may be getting older, but they are not blind yet. He looked at you the way my Paulo used to look at me, may he rest in peace. He is young enough to be my—" Natalie stopped herself before completing the thought. Tom Fletcher was not young enough to be her son, not really, but the 11-year gap between them felt significant enough to make her uncomfortable with the direction her thoughts kept drifting. "Young enough to be your what? Your husband? Many women marry men younger than themselves," Rosa said pragmatically. "And many women marry men much older. Age is just numbers. What matters is here." She pressed a weathered hand to her heart. Before Natalie could respond, the door opened and Tom entered, carrying a worn saddle bag and a rifle. Up close, she could see details she had missed before. A small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his shoulders filled out his shirt, the confident way he moved through space like he belonged wherever he happened to be. "I took the liberty of getting supplies from the general store for the repairs," he said, setting down his belongings. "If you could show me which room is mine, I will get settled and start working on those bullet holes before they let in rain." Natalie led him upstairs to a modest but clean room at the end of the hall, acutely aware of his presence behind her on the narrow staircase. "This is the quietest room, away from the saloon noise. Fresh linens are in the wardrobe, and there is a wash basin with clean water." Tom set his saddle bag on the bed and looked around with apparent satisfaction. "This is fine, madam. Better than most places I have stayed. I appreciate your hospitality." "You saved my life this morning," Natalie said quietly. "It is the least I can do." "I suspect you have handled worse than one drunk with a gun," Tom said, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. "A woman who runs her own establishment in a town like this has got to have steel in her spine." Something in his tone suggested admiration rather than condescension, which was unusual in Natalie's experience. Most men either resented her independence or tried to convince her she needed a husband to manage things properly. "The West has taught me to be practical about survival." "The West teaches everyone that lesson one way or another." Tom's expression grew distant for a moment. "I lost my parents when I was 16. My father to influenza, my mother to heartbreak 6 months later. I have been making my own way ever since." "I am sorry for your loss," Natalie said, meaning it. "Losing people we love changes us in ways we never quite recover from. You lost your husband," the sheriff mentioned. "It was not quite a question. 6 years ago. A mine collapse outside of town. They never recovered his body." Natalie swallowed against the familiar tightness in her throat. Even after all this time, talking about James brought a pang of loss, though she had learned to carry it like an old injury that ached but no longer crippled. "That must have been terrible," Tom said with quiet sympathy. "Were you married long?" 10 years. We met in Kansas when I was 18 and he was 25. He had dreams of making a fortune in silver mining. She smiled sadly. I got the silver saloon instead of the silver mine, which is about as close as we came to those dreams. Sometimes the dreams we build are better than the ones we planned, Tom said. You have created something here. A business, a life. That takes courage. The sincerity in his voice made Natalie's chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with grief. She stepped back, putting necessary distance between them. I should let you get settled. Come down when you are ready to eat. Rosa makes excellent stew and there is fresh bread. Over the following days, Tom proved himself invaluable around the Silver Star. He repaired the bullet damage with skilled precision, fixed a leaking section of roof that had been troubling Natalie for months, and even helped reorganize the storage room. In the evenings, he would sit at the bar nursing a single beer, watching the card games and occasional fights with the calm readiness of someone who knew how to handle trouble but preferred to avoid it. Natalie found herself increasingly aware of his presence. The way he would appear at her elbow when a customer got too aggressive, not interfering but simply standing close enough to make his position clear. How he always seemed to know when she needed help lifting something heavy or reaching something on a high shelf. The sound of his laugh, warm and genuine, when Rosa told stories about her 7 grandchildren. You should invite him to dinner, Rosa said one afternoon while they were preparing food for the evening crowd. A proper dinner, not just the usual stew at the bar. Why would I do that? Natalie asked, knowing she sounded defensive. Because he looks at you like you are water in the desert, and you look at him like you are afraid to drink even though you are dying of thirst, Rosa said bluntly. What is the worst that could happen? You enjoy a pleasant meal with a handsome young man who clearly admires you. He is too young for me, Natalie protested, voicing the worry that had been circling in her mind like a persistent fly. Says who? You. Did he say he thinks you are too old? Rosa raised an eyebrow. Because from where I stand, he does not seem to care about numbers. He cares about you. That evening, Natalie found herself standing at the bottom of the stairs, heart pounding before she could talk herself out of it. She climbed to Tom's room and knocked softly. He opened the door in his shirt sleeves, his hair damp from washing. Mrs. Kane, is something wrong? No, I just... Natalie felt suddenly foolish. Rosa is making something special tonight, chicken with herbs and roasted vegetables. I thought if you were not busy, you might join me for dinner. Upstairs in my private quarters, away from the noise. Tom's face lit up with a smile that made him look even younger and somehow more handsome. I would like that very much. Natalie's private rooms consisted of a small sitting area and bedroom above the saloon, furnished with pieces she and James had brought from Kansas. She had set the small table by the window, where the evening light painted everything in shades of gold and amber. Rosa had outdone herself with the meal, and there was even a bottle of decent wine that Natalie had been saving for no particular occasion. Tom appeared exactly on time, cleaned up and wearing what was clearly his best shirt. He had even trimmed his beard, and Natalie caught the faint scent of bay rum soap. This is real nice, Tom said, looking around the cozy space. Feels like a home, not just rooms above a business. I've tried to make it comfortable, Natalie said, suddenly seeing her familiar surroundings through his eyes. The embroidered cushions, the photographs on the wall, the books on the shelf. It is not much, but it is mine. They sat down to eat, and conversation flowed more easily than Natalie had expected. Tom talked about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, his dreams of having his own ranch someday. Natalie shared stories about learning to run the saloon, the challenges of being a woman in a business dominated by men, the small satisfactions of making the Silver Star successful. You should be proud of what you have built here, Tom said, refilling her wine glass. Not many people have the strength to start over after losing everything. I had no choice, Natalie said. It was either make something of myself or give up and go back east to live with my sister. I could not face that. I needed to prove I could survive on my own terms. It is more than survival, though, Tom said. You are thriving. People respect you. They come to the Silver Star not just for the drinks, but because they know it is run honestly, that they will be treated fairly. How do you know that? Natalie asked, surprised. I have been listening. When you are new in town, you hear things. Folks talk about you with respect. That is rare. He paused, his blue eyes serious in the lamplight. Can I be honest with you about something, Mrs. Kane? Natalie, she corrected softly. Please call me Natalie. Natalie. He said her name like he was tasting something precious. I did not just happen upon you that morning when you were in trouble. I had seen you the day before, walking to the general store. I asked around about you, learned you ran the Silver Star. I was planning to come by and ask about a room anyway, but when I heard the shooting, I came running. Natalie's breath caught. Why? Because from the moment I saw you, I could not stop thinking about you. Tom reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. I know I am younger than you. I know I am just a drifter with nothing but a horse and some dreams. But I have never felt this way before, like I have been wandering my whole life until I found exactly where I am supposed to be. Tom, Natalie did not pull her hand away when he closed the distance, his fingers warm and slightly rough against her skin. I am 34 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. You should be courting some young woman with youth and beauty, not a widowed saloon owner with more years behind her than ahead. You are exactly what I have been seeking, Tom said firmly. I do not want some girl who has never known hardship or loss. I want a woman who has lived, who has fought and survived and built something real. I want someone who knows her own mind and is not afraid to speak it. I want you, Natalie Kane, if you will have me. The intensity in his voice made Natalie's heart race. You barely know me. Then let me know you better. Let me court you properly. No pressure, no expectations beyond spending time together and seeing where this leads. His thumb stroked gently across her knuckles. Unless you feel nothing for me, in which case I will respect that and keep my distance. But I do not think that is true. I see the way you look at me when you think I am not paying attention. Natalie felt her cheeks flush. I am old enough to know better than to let myself feel things that can only lead to trouble. What kind of trouble? Two people caring for each other. That is not trouble, that is living. Tom's grip tightened slightly. I know the world will judge, I know people will talk, but I have spent 7 years not caring what anyone thinks, doing what I need to do to survive. For the first time, I have found something worth staying for. Someone worth staying for. You are supposed to be looking for ranch work, Natalie said weakly, her resolve crumbling under the warmth in his eyes. I found work at the Silver Star. Rosa mentioned you have been thinking about expanding, maybe adding a proper stable for guests' horses. I know horses and carpentry. I could help build it, manage it. If you wanted. He paused. If you wanted me to stay. Natalie looked at their joined hands, his young and strong, hers showing the first signs of age in faint lines and sun spots. The difference in their years felt like a chasm she should not cross. But when she met his eyes again, she saw nothing but certainty and genuine affection. I am too old for you, she protested one more time, needing him to understand what he would be taking on. You are exactly what I have been seeking, Tom repeated, his voice steady and sure. Age is just a number, Natalie. What matters is that I feel more alive sitting here with you than I have felt in years. What matters is that you make me want to build something lasting instead of just drifting from town to town. What matters is this. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "This feeling that I have finally found home." Natalie felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming rush of emotions she had been suppressing for days. "I am frightened," she admitted, "of what people will say, of what it means, of wanting something this much again after I learned how much it hurts to lose it." "I am frightened too," Tom said, "but I would rather be scared and alive than safe and just existing. Give me a chance, Natalie. Give us a chance." She looked at him for a long moment, this young cowboy who had ridden into her life and somehow seen past all her defenses to the lonely woman beneath. Then, making a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right, she nodded. "One step at a time. We see how this unfolds. No promises beyond trying." The smile that transformed Tom's face was worth every doubt and fear. "That is all I ask." In the weeks that followed, Manasseh got used to the sight of Tom Fletcher and Natalie Kane together. He started building the stable she had been dreaming about, working with steady determination through the hot Colorado days. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of the Silver Star, talking until the stars came out. Sometimes he would read to her from newspapers that came in on the stage, his voice pleasant in the gathering darkness. Other times they simply sat in comfortable silence, his hand finding hers naturally, fitting together like pieces that had always belonged that way. The town gossips had plenty to say, of course. Natalie heard the whispers when she walked to the general store, saw the disapproving looks from some of the older women. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house down the street, made a point of commenting loudly that it was unseemly for a woman of Natalie's position to be seen keeping company with a man so much younger. "People talk," Natalie said to Tom one evening, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. Mrs. Henderson suggested I was making a fool of myself. Tom's jaw tightened. Mrs. Henderson is a bitter woman who has nothing better to do than judge other people's happiness. The question is not what she thinks. The question is what you think, what you feel. "I feel happy," Natalie admitted. "Happier than I have been in years, but I worry about you, about people judging you for choosing a woman my age." "Let them judge," Tom said simply. "I am a grown man who knows his own mind. I chose you because you are smart and strong and beautiful, because you make me laugh. Because when I am with you, everything makes sense in a way it never has before." He cupped her face gently in his hands. "I love you, Natalie Kane. I know it has only been weeks, but I know what I feel. I have known since the first time I saw you that you were going to change my life." "I love you too," Natalie whispered, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. "God help me, I do. I tried not to. I told myself all the reasons it was foolish, but you just kept being kind and patient and wonderful, and I could not help it." Tom kissed her then, sweet and gentle and full of promise. It was not Natalie's first kiss, but it felt like something new and precious nonetheless. When they parted, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast. I know people will talk even more. But I want to spend my life with you. I want to help you build the Silver Star into something even greater. I want to grow old together and watch the world change and face whatever comes side by side." "Yes," Natalie said, surprising herself with how quickly the answer came. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed in the small church in Manasseh on a bright October morning, with Rosa and Sheriff Morrison standing as witnesses. Some townspeople stayed away in disapproval, but many more came to celebrate. The new young minister, Reverend Clark, performed the ceremony with genuine warmth, speaking about how love recognizes no boundaries save those of the heart. Natalie wore a simple cream-colored dress, her hair pinned up with small white flowers Rosa had helped her arrange. Tom wore a new suit he had saved up for, looking handsome and proud as he took her hand at the altar. When he slipped the plain gold band onto her finger, Natalie felt the last of her doubts melt away. This was right. This was real. The reception at the Silver Star was loud and joyful, with music and dancing and more food than Rosa usually prepared in a week. Tom held Natalie close as they danced, not caring who saw, his eyes never leaving her face. "Happy," he murmured into her ear. "Incredibly," she replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. That night, in the private rooms above the saloon that were now theirs together, Tom was gentle and patient with Natalie, taking time to learn what brought her pleasure, showing her with actions what he had already told her with words. It had been 6 long years since she had been with anyone, but Tom made her feel cherished and desired in ways that went beyond the physical act. Afterwards, lying in the warm circle of his arms, Natalie traced idle patterns on his chest. "No regrets?" she asked softly. "Not a single one," Tom said, kissing the top of her head. "You? Only that I wasted time worrying about what other people would think instead of trusting my heart sooner," Natalie admitted. Life settled into new rhythms after the wedding. Tom proved himself an astute businessman, and together they made the Silver Star more successful than Natalie had managed alone. The stable he built attracted travelers who appreciated having a safe, well-managed place for their horses. He hired a young man named Daniel to help with the stable work, giving him a steady job that kept him out of the trouble he had been drifting toward. Tom also quietly dealt with the customers who gave Natalie trouble, his calm presence enough to discourage the kind of behavior that had once been more common. He never had to throw a punch. Something about his steady gaze and quiet confidence made men think twice about causing problems. Rosa treated Tom like the grandson she had always wanted, teaching him family recipes and offering advice he sometimes took and sometimes politely ignored. She was delighted when, 6 months after the wedding, Natalie confirmed what they had both begun to suspect. "You are with child." Rosa's face lit up with joy. Natalie nodded, hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "The doctor confirmed it this morning. I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure." "Does Tom know?" "Not yet. I wanted to be certain before I told him." Natalie bit her lip. "I am 35 years old, Rosa. Women my age face risks in childbearing." "Women of any age face risks," Rosa said pragmatically. "But you are healthy and strong, you will be fine, and Tom will be over the moon." Rosa was right. When Natalie told Tom that evening, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He actually picked her up and spun her around before remembering himself and setting her down gently as if she might break. "A baby," he breathed, his hand covering hers on her stomach. "Our baby. Natalie, His voice broke with emotion. "I never let myself dream this big. A wife I love, a business we built together, and now a child." "Are you certain you are ready for this?" Natalie asked, needing reassurance. "You are only 24. Most men your age are still sowing wild oats, not preparing for fatherhood." "I stopped being most men the day my parents died and I had to grow up fast," Tom said seriously. "I am more ready for this than I have been for anything in my life. We are going to be wonderful parents, Natalie. I promise you that." The pregnancy was not easy. Natalie suffered from sickness that lasted well into the 4th month and swelling in her feet that made standing at the bar uncomfortable. Tom took over more of the day-to-day operations without complaint, insisting she rest whenever possible. He read to her in the evenings from a book about infant care that he had ordered from Denver. His earnest determination to learn everything about being a father both touching and amusing. In late February of 1881, after a long and difficult labor that left Tom pacing anxiously in the saloon below, Natalie gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James Thomas Fletcher, honoring both her first husband and his father. When Tom first held his son, tears streaming unabashedly down his face, Natalie knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice in marrying this man. "He is perfect," Tom whispered, carefully supporting the tiny head. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift, Natalie, for all of it." The first months of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. Tom proved to be a natural father, patient with late-night feedings and endless diaper changes. He built a beautiful cradle for James, carving small horses along the sides. On warm days, he would carry the baby around the stable, talking to him about the horses as if he could understand every word. Natalie watched her husband and son together, and felt a contentment she had not known was possible. The age difference that had once worried her so much seemed irrelevant now. Tom had shown himself to be mature beyond his years, while his youth brought energy and optimism that balanced her more cautious nature. The Silver Star continued to thrive. They added rooms to accommodate more guests, and Tom's stable became known throughout the region for excellent care and fair prices. By the time James was walking and getting into everything, they employed 6 people and were considering opening a second stable on the other side of town. "Never in my wildest dreams," Natalie said one evening, watching Tom play with their son on the floor of their sitting room. James was 2 years old now, a happy child with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. "Never in your wildest dreams what?" Tom asked, looking up with a smile. "Did I imagine my life would be this full again?" Natalie finished. "After James's father died, I thought the best I could hope for was survival. You gave me so much more than that." Tom got up, leaving their son playing with wooden blocks, and crossed to where Natalie sat. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms, swaying gently even though there was no music. "You gave me purpose and home and love. I was drifting before I found you, just existing from one day to the next. You taught me what it means to truly live." "I love you," Natalie said, resting her head against his shoulder. "I know I say it often, but I need you to understand how much. You saw past the years, past the walls I had built, straight to the heart of me. You were patient when I was afraid. You were certain when I doubted. You made me believe in second chances. And third and fourth chances," Tom said with a grin. "Life keeps giving us chances, Natalie. We just have to be brave enough to take them." That summer, they received word that a railroad spur was being planned that would bring the line closer to Manassas. The town was growing, and with it, opportunities for business expansion. Tom proposed building a proper hotel adjacent to the saloon, something with 20 rooms and a dining room that could serve the increased traffic the railroad would bring. "It is a big investment," Natalie said, studying the plans he had drawn up. "A big risk." "We have been taking risks together since the day we met," Tom pointed out. "And every one of them has paid off because we are a good team. We balance each other. Your caution keeps my enthusiasm in check. My optimism keeps you from being too conservative. Together, we make smart decisions." They broke ground on the hotel in the fall of 1882. By then, James was 3.5 and Natalie was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because Tom had gotten even better at anticipating her needs and managing the business. Their daughter arrived in April of 1883, a healthy baby girl with Tom's features and a surprisingly loud cry for someone so small. They named her Rose after Rosa, who cried when she learned the honor they had bestowed. "2 children," Tom said, holding his daughter while James pressed close to see his new sister. "Our family is growing." "Are you overwhelmed?" Natalie asked, watching her young husband juggle fatherhood, the business, and a wife who was still recovering from childbirth. "I am blessed," Tom corrected. "Every single day I wake up and remember that this is my life now, that you chose me, that we built this together. How could I be anything but grateful?" The hotel opened to great success in the summer of 1884. The railroad spur had indeed brought increased traffic to Manassas, and the Fletcher establishment, as it was now known, became the premier place to stay in the region. They employed 20 people, including a proper manager for the hotel and an excellent chef for the dining room. Natalie stepped back from the day-to-day operations to focus more on their children, though she still kept a close eye on the books and made the major decisions alongside Tom. At 39, she found herself happier and more fulfilled than she had ever imagined possible. The years that had once worried her so much now seemed like a blessing rather than a curse. Her experience and maturity combined with Tom's energy and vision created something neither could have achieved alone. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Tom took Natalie to Denver for a week, leaving the children in Rosa's capable care. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since James was born, and they reveled in the freedom to simply be a couple. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, attended a theater performance. Tom bought Natalie a beautiful brooch in the shape of a silver star, a reminder of where their journey had begun. She bought him a new pocket watch engraved with their wedding date and the initials of their children. "Do you ever regret it?" Natalie asked one night as they lay in the hotel room, the sounds of the city filtering through the windows. "Marrying an older woman instead of starting fresh with someone younger." Tom turned to face her, his expression serious in the lamplight. "I need you to hear me, truly hear me, Natalie. I have never regretted one single moment of our life together. Not when people whispered about us in the early days, not when the work got hard, not when money was tight or the children kept us up all night. You are not just what I settled for or made do with. You are exactly what I wanted, what I needed, what I spent my life searching for without knowing it." "But you were so young," Natalie protested. "You had not experienced enough of life to know what you wanted." "I had experienced plenty of life," Tom said firmly. "I had been on my own for 7 years. I had worked dozens of jobs in twice as many towns. I had known plenty of women, young and old, and none of them made me feel what you did the first time I saw you. None of them made me want to stop drifting and start building. That was all you, Natalie. Your strength, your resilience, your kindness beneath the tough exterior you show the world. I fell in love with who you are, not the number of years you have been alive." "I love you so much," Natalie whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I just want you to be happy. I want to be enough. You are more than enough. You are everything." Tom wiped her tears gently. "And I am happy. Deliriously, ridiculously happy. Can you believe that? Can you finally accept that this age difference that troubles you so much does not matter to me at all?" Natalie nodded, finally allowing herself to fully embrace what her heart had known all along. The years between them were just numbers, meaningless in the face of what they had built together. Tom had been right from the beginning. She was exactly what he had been seeking, just as he was exactly what she had needed without knowing it. They returned to Manassas renewed and even more committed to each other and their growing family. James was proving to be a bright child with his father's curiosity and his mother's quick mind. Rose was still a baby but already showing signs of a strong will and sunny disposition that delighted everyone who met her. The Fletcher establishment continued to prosper through the 1880s. The railroad brought more people to the San Luis Valley, and Manassas grew from a rough mining town into a proper community with churches and schools. Tom became involved in town government, using his business acumen to help plan for continued growth. Natalie focused on charitable work, helping newly arrived widows and single women find their footing in a place that could be harsh to those without support. In 1887, they welcomed a third child, another boy they named William. Tom was now 29, and Natalie was 42. The pregnancy had been harder, and the doctor warned that future pregnancies could be dangerous. But William arrived healthy and strong, completing their family in a way that felt perfectly right. 3 children, Tom said, holding his youngest son while James and Rose played nearby. "We have built something amazing, Natalie. Not just the business, but this family, this life." "We have been very fortunate," Natalie agreed, watching her children with a mother's protective love. "I never imagined I would have this chance at happiness again, let alone children." "You gave me that gift." "We gave it to each other," Tom corrected. "Everything we have, we built together." As the years passed, the age difference between them became even less noticeable. When Tom turned 30, he had laugh lines around his eyes and the beginnings of a weathered look that came from years of outdoor work. Natalie, at 45, remained beautiful in his eyes, her auburn hair now touched with silver but her spirit as strong as ever. The children grew. James showed an aptitude for horses and business, already talking about expanding the stable operation when he was old enough. Rose was gentle and artistic, filling notebooks with drawings of everything she saw. William was the adventurer, always getting into something and giving his parents new gray hairs. Sheriff Morrison retired, and Tom was asked to take his place. He declined, preferring to focus on the business and his family, but he did agree to serve as deputy when needed. His reputation as a fair and steady man made him someone people turned to when disputes needed resolving. Rosa, growing older herself, cut back her hours but remained a constant presence in their lives. She doted on the children, teaching them Spanish and recipes passed down through her own family. She often told Natalie that she had been right to follow her heart, that the love between Natalie and Tom was real and lasting, worth any judgment they had faced. On a warm evening in June of 1890, Natalie and Tom sat on the porch of the Silver Star, watching the sun set over the mountains. Their children were inside with Rosa, who was teaching them to make tortillas. The sound of their laughter drifted through the open windows. "Do you remember the day we met?" Tom asked, his hand finding Natalie's as naturally as breathing. "How could I forget? You saved my life and then turned it upside down in the best possible way," Natalie said with a smile. "I was so determined to resist you." "You told me you were too old for me," Tom recalled. "You were so certain that the years between us mattered." "And you told me I was exactly what you had been seeking," Natalie finished. "You were right, Tom, about all of it. The years do not matter. What matters is that we found each other. That we were brave enough to take a chance on something people said would not work." "Best decision I ever made," Tom said, bringing her hand to his lips. "Riding into Manassas that day, seeing you, knowing somehow that my life was about to change. It was like everything I had been through, all the loss and loneliness and wandering, was leading me to that exact moment." "I felt the same," Natalie admitted. "Even when I was fighting it, some part of me recognized you, recognized that you were meant to be part of my story." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Inside, their children's voices rose in song, Rosa teaching them an old melody in Spanish. The Silver Star glowed with lamplight, welcoming and warm, a beacon of home. "Thank you," Tom said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing past your fears, for giving us a chance, for building this life with me." He turned to face her, his blue eyes still as bright and clear as the day they met. "For loving me. Thank you for being patient with my doubts," Natalie replied. "For being exactly who you said you were. For loving me not despite my age but simply for who I am. For giving me hope when I thought that part of my life was over." Tom pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, horse and leather and the bay rum soap he still used. They had weathered judgments and challenges, built a business and raised children, grown together through all the joys and sorrows that life brought. The age that had once seemed like such an insurmountable barrier now felt like part of their story, the thing that made them appreciate each other more deeply. Tom's youth had brought fresh perspective and energy to Natalie's experience and wisdom. Together they had created something neither could have achieved alone. Years continued to pass in the contentment of a life well lived. James grew into a fine young man who took over management of the stables, expanding the operation with his father's encouragement. Rose discovered a talent for music and began teaching piano lessons to the town's children. William, true to his adventurous nature, talked of exploring beyond the San Luis Valley, though he was still young enough that such dreams were years away from reality. Tom and Natalie grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. The physical passion of their early years mellowed into something even more profound, a partnership so complete they often knew what the other was thinking before words were spoken. In 1895, they celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary with a party that drew people from throughout the region. The Silver Star and the Fletcher Hotel were now cornerstones of Manassas's economy, employing dozens of people and serving as a source of community pride. Tom was 40 years old now, respected as a businessman and community leader. Natalie, at 55, remained the heart of their operation, her sharp mind for numbers and keen understanding of people as strong as ever. 15 years, Tom said in his speech at the anniversary celebration. 15 years since I convinced the most stubborn, beautiful, wonderful woman in Colorado to take a chance on a young drifter with nothing but dreams and determination. People said it would not last, that we were too different, that the years between us were too many. But what those people did not understand was that love sees what matters, and what matters is not the number of years we have lived, but the life we choose to live together. He raised his glass to Natalie, his eyes shining with emotion. "To my wife, my partner, my best friend. You are still exactly what I have been seeking, today, tomorrow, and every day for the rest of my life." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Natalie stood, embracing Tom as tears of joy streamed down her face. Looking around at the friends and family who had gathered to celebrate with them, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the unexpected journey her life had taken. Rosa, now quite elderly but still sharp as ever, approached them after the formal speeches. "I told you," she said with satisfaction. "I told you that love was what mattered, not numbers. Look at what you built together." "You were right," Natalie said, hugging the older woman carefully. "Thank you for pushing me to see what was right in front of me." As the 1890s drew to a close and a new century approached, the Fletcher family looked toward the future with optimism. James had married a local girl, Sarah, and they were expecting their first child. Rose had caught the eye of a young banker from Denver who visited Manassas regularly on business. Even young William seemed to be settling down, showing interest in the hotel side of the family business. Tom and Natalie began to gradually step back from daily operations, training the next generation to take over what they had built. They had worked hard for 2 decades, and now it was time to enjoy the fruits of that labor. On a crisp autumn day in 1900, Natalie and Tom rode out to a piece of land they owned outside of town, a beautiful spot with views of the mountains and a creek running through it. They had been talking about building a small house there, a place to retire to when the time came. "Can you imagine?" Tom said, dismounting and helping Natalie down from her horse. "Just the two of us, a garden, some chickens, peace and quiet after all these years of running a business." "It sounds wonderful," Natalie said, though her eyes were thoughtful. "You are only 45, Tom. Still a young man with plenty of productive years ahead. Are you certain you are ready to retire?" "I am ready to spend more time with you," Tom said, pulling her into his arms. "We have spent 20 years building something for our children and our community. Now I want time that is just ours. We can travel, visit places we have never seen. Or we can stay right here and watch the mountains change with the seasons. As long as I am with you, I do not care what we do." Natalie smiled up at him, this man who had chosen her against all conventional wisdom and made her happier than she had ever dreamed possible. At 56, she felt the weight of years in her joints and the silver that now dominated her hair. But in Tom's eyes, she still saw the same love and desire that had been there the first time he told her she was exactly what he had been seeking. "I love you," she said simply. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I will love you for all the years we have left and whatever comes after," Tom replied, kissing her softly. They broke ground on their retirement home in the spring of 1901. It was a modest structure compared to the hotel and saloon, but it was built with care and love, a place designed for comfort and companionship. By autumn, it was finished, and they moved in, leaving James and Sarah to manage the family business. The transition was easier than either had expected. Their children were more than capable of running the Fletcher establishment, and Tom and Natalie found joy in being available for advice without the burden of daily management. They spent their mornings working in the garden, their afternoons reading or taking long walks, their evenings in quiet conversation by the fire. In 1902, their first grandchild was born, a boy named Thomas after his grandfather. Holding his grandson for the first time, Tom felt the completion of a circle, the continuation of the family he and Natalie had created against all odds. "Your great-grandmother Rosa would have loved to see this," Natalie said softly. The old woman had passed peacefully in her sleep the previous winter, leaving a hole in all their hearts. "She knew," Tom said confidently. "She knew what we were building would last beyond ourselves. She believed in us from the beginning." More grandchildren followed in the years that came. Rose married her banker and moved to Denver, but visited regularly with her growing family. William, surprising everyone, fell in love with a teacher who came west from Boston and settled down to run the hotel with dedication that belied his earlier wild tendencies. Tom and Natalie watched their family grow from the peaceful remove of their small house outside town. They celebrated holidays surrounded by children and grandchildren, passing on stories and traditions. They traveled when the spirit moved them, taking a trip to San Francisco and another to New Orleans, seeing parts of the country they had only read about. Through it all, their love remained the constant foundation of their lives. Tom never treated Natalie as if she were old or fragile, and she never made him feel as if his relative youth was a liability. They were simply partners, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and chosen to build something beautiful together. In the summer of 1909, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Tom was now 54, his hair graying at the temples but his body still strong from years of physical work. Natalie was 65, moving a bit slower than she once had but still sharp-minded and engaged with the world around her. Their family gathered at the Fletcher Hotel for a grand celebration. 3 children, 7 grandchildren so far, and a community that still remembered how the young cowboy and the widowed saloon owner had defied expectations to create an enduring love story. 30 years, James said in his toast. My parents have shown us all what commitment means. What it means to see past surface differences to the heart of a person. What it means to build something lasting. Rose added her own tribute, tears streaming down her face. I grew up watching my father worship the ground my mother walked on, and watching my mother trust in his love even when the world said she should not. They taught us that age is just a number, that what matters is character and commitment and choosing each other every single day. William finished the children's tributes with characteristic humor. They also taught us that stubbornness runs in the family. When everyone said it would not work, they just dug in and proved everyone wrong. I am grateful every day that Dad was too stubborn to accept no for an answer, and that Mom was eventually smart enough to say yes. Tom stood to respond, pulling Natalie up with him. Your mother tried to send me away, he said with a grin. She told me she was too old for me, that I should find some young woman to build a life with. But I knew from the moment I saw her that she was exactly what I had been seeking. Not just any woman, but this woman. This strong, brilliant, beautiful woman who saw the world clearly and faced it with courage. He turned to Natalie, taking both her hands in his. 30 years ago, you took the biggest risk of your life when you said yes to me. You trusted that what we felt was real, even when it scared you, even when people whispered and judged. You believed in us enough to try. And look at what we created. Not just this business or this family, but this life. This beautiful, messy, wonderful life full of love and purpose and meaning. Natalie could not speak past the lump in her throat, so she simply kissed him, not caring that their children and grandchildren and half the town were watching. After 30 years, she had long since stopped worrying about what anyone thought. Tom had been right all along. She was exactly what he had been seeking, and he was exactly what she had needed. The years between them were irrelevant in the face of what they had built together. As the 1910s progressed, both Tom and Natalie slowed down, as was natural with advancing years. Natalie developed some arthritis that made cold mornings difficult, and Tom's hearing began to fade on one side. But they adapted, as they always had, finding new ways to enjoy their life together. They spent long hours in their garden, grew closer to their grandchildren, and took pleasure in simple things. A beautiful sunset, a letter from Rose in Denver, the first tomatoes of summer, the way the mountains looked after a fresh snowfall. In 1915, Tom turned 60. Natalie, now 71, threw him a surprise party that brought tears to his eyes. Looking around at the gathering of family and friends, Tom felt the weight of a life well lived, rich with love and connection. 60 years old, he said to Natalie that night as they prepared for bed. I am getting old, wife. Soon you will be married to an elderly man. Natalie laughed, the sound still bright despite her years. I believe I have been married to a younger man for quite long enough. It is about time you caught up to me. Tom pulled her close, his arms still strong despite the years. I will never catch up to your wisdom or your grace, but I promise to keep trying until my last day. That is all I have ever asked, Natalie said, resting her head on his shoulder. Just you, trying your best, loving me with that stubborn determination that would not take no for an answer. The war years of 1914 through 1918 touched their family as it touched all of America. William's eldest son enlisted and served in France, coming home changed but alive. The hotel did its part, hosting war bond drives and providing lodging for families visiting loved ones at nearby camps. Through the challenges of those years, Tom and Natalie remained each other's steady support. When news from Europe was bad, they held each other and prayed for peace. When their grandson came home, they wept with relief. They had lived through enough loss to know how precious every day together was. In the spring of 1920, their golden anniversary approached. Tom was now 65, Natalie a remarkable 76. They had outlived many of their contemporaries, but both remained relatively healthy and certainly clear-minded. Their love had not just endured but deepened through 5 decades of shared joys and sorrows. The celebration was massive, drawing people from throughout Colorado and beyond. The Fletcher establishment had touched countless lives over the years, and people came to honor the couple who had built it. There were telegrams from the governor, letters from business associates across the West, and a steady stream of well-wishers. But the moment Tom treasured most came in the quiet of their bedroom that night, after all the guests had gone home. Natalie sat at her dressing table, taking the pins from her white hair, and he came to stand behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. 50 years, he said softly. Half a century with the love of my life. Do you remember how frightened you were at the beginning? How certain that our age difference would doom us? I was a fool, Natalie said, covering his hands with hers. The biggest fool in Colorado. I nearly let the best thing that ever happened to me slip away because of numbers that meant nothing. But you did not let me slip away, Tom reminded her. You were brave enough to take a chance, to trust what your heart knew even when your head was full of doubts. You made it easy, Natalie said. You never wavered, never gave me reason to doubt your love. For 50 years, you have shown me every single day that I am cherished and valued. That I am exactly what you wanted. How could I not blossom under that kind of devotion? Tom kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of the lavender water she had used since he first knew her. I was just a drifting cowboy when I rode into Manassas. I had nothing but a horse and some vague dreams. You gave me everything that mattered: home, family, purpose, love. You are the reason my life has meaning. We gave it to each other, Natalie corrected, as she always did. Everything we have we built together. Two people who should not have worked on paper, but created something beautiful in reality. They went to bed that night wrapped in each other's arms, as they had done for 50 years. Two people who had proven that love recognizes no boundaries save those of the heart. The 1920s brought changes to Manassas and the wider world. The Fletcher establishment modernized, adding electricity and indoor plumbing to all the rooms. Automobiles began to replace horses, though Tom remained loyal to his beloved mount until the old horse passed away peacefully at an advanced age. Tom and Natalie, now both in their 70s, moved more slowly but remained engaged with life. They had 15 grandchildren and had recently welcomed their first great-grandchild. The family they had created spread like roots from a strong tree, and they took pride in each new branch. In 1925, Natalie fell ill with pneumonia. For a terrifying week, Tom barely left her side, holding her hand and willing her to fight. At 76, her body was not as resilient as it once had been, but her spirit remained strong. She recovered slowly, and Tom cared for her with tender devotion, refusing to let anyone else take over her nursing. "You are supposed to let me go first," Tom told her one night during her recovery. "I cannot imagine this world without you in it." "Then I will have to stick around," Natalie said weakly. "I am not leaving you yet, Tom Fletcher. We still have more sunsets to watch together." She kept her word. By summer, she had regained most of her strength, and they returned to their quiet routine. But the illness had reminded them both of mortality, of the precious nature of each day they had together. On a golden afternoon in October of that year, they sat in their garden watching the leaves change color. Tom was 70, his hair white but his blue eyes still bright. Natalie was 76, frail but beautiful, the love of his life in every way that mattered. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had listened to you that day?" Tom asked. "If I had accepted your rejection and moved on to find some young woman?" "I would have lived a smaller life," Natalie said. "Safer, perhaps, but so much emptier. You pushed me to be brave, Tom, to reach for happiness even when it frightened me. That is the greatest gift you ever gave me." "You gave me a life worth living," Tom replied. "Everything I am, everything I became started the day I met you. You were exactly what I had been seeking, Natalie. You still are." They sat in peaceful silence, hands intertwined, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Two people who had defied expectations and created a love story that would be told by their descendants for generations to come. Two people who had proven that age was just a number, that what mattered was the courage to love and be loved in return. Tom would outlive his beloved Natalie by 5 years. She passed peacefully in her sleep in 1930 at the age of 81, surrounded by family. He held her hand as she took her last breath, whispering that she was exactly what he had been seeking, exactly what he would love until his own last day and beyond. He kept that promise, remaining devoted to her memory until he joined her in 1935 at the age of 80. In his final moments, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, Tom Fletcher smiled and said he could see Natalie waiting for him. "I told you that you were exactly what I had been seeking," were his last words. "And I was right." They were buried side by side in the Manassas Cemetery, their shared headstone reading simply, "Thomas and Natalie Fletcher. Two hearts, one love, eternal devotion." The Silver Star and Fletcher Hotel continued to operate for many more decades, run by their descendants, a lasting legacy of two people who chose love over fear and built something beautiful that endured long after they were gone. Their story became legend in Manassas, passed down through generations. The tale of the young cowboy who rode into town and fell in love with a widowed saloon owner 11 years his senior. The woman who protested that she was too old, and the man who insisted she was exactly what he had been seeking. The couple who proved that love sees past age, past circumstance, past anything the world throws in its way when two hearts recognize each other as home.